I'm Chris Burns, and welcome to The Network. Hard talk with a matrix of newsmakers. The headlines.
The most hotly debated 21st century weapons, drones, have been an important means of fighting an adversary at no risk to the virtual pilots. But what are the wider risks? Drones have been successful in killing key figures in extremist groups, which have murdered civilians in terror attacks in Europe and the United States. But it is also a blunt-edged weapon that can kill or injure innocent bystanders, and it is criticized as summary executions against international law. Drones are also criticized as lacking the punch of more conventional means, while other countries wield planes and boots on the ground with greater effectiveness.
Now, wired into this edition of The Network here at the European Parliament in Brussels, Alain Deneuve, researcher at the Royal Higher Institute for Defense, Andrew Stolijn, European spokesman for Human Rights Watch, and Roland Freudenstein, deputy director and head of research at the Martin Center for European Studies. Welcome to all of you. I'd like to ask a question to all of you, starting with Alain. How effective are drones in fighting extremist groups, and are we safer thanks to them?
We have not concrete ideas of how effective it could be, and what are the results of these strikes on the global strategy of the United States and the countries that are using drones.
Okay, Alain, I might mention you are a military analyst, but you're from the Belgian government, correct?
Exactly.
Andrew, from the Human Rights Watch side, how do you see this?
The laws of war are very clear that the combatants have to distinguish between enemies and civilians. And in many cases, drones have been able to do that, and in many cases they haven't, and we've seen the difference. You asked the question, are we safer? Well, it depends on who we are. If we are a family in Yemen that is destroyed by a drone strike that has gone astray, then we are not safer.
Roland, are we safer? How effective are these?
Well, I think, first of all, everything you can say against drones, you can say about any modern weapon system. Now, the question is, have drones been effective in keeping Al-Qaeda on the run? Have they been effective in keeping Al-Qaeda from regrouping and planning and executing large terror attacks in Western countries? Yes, they have.
I guess maybe continue with the argument. Perhaps you could say, well, isn't this more precise than, say, a bomb or a cruise missile, perhaps causing less collateral damage and less civilian casualties? What do you think, Alain?
It's not a silver bullet weapon. You can have mistakes in targeting. It is not easy to distinguish between civilian peoples and military peoples on the terrain. There are always a risk of confusion.
Okay, so Andrew, I mean, do you see this as perhaps it could be a more precise weapon or not?
The problem comes with the legal advice that governments are taking on the use of drones when that's not made public. For example, in the recent UK drone strike back in August, we saw that the legal advice that Prime Minister David Cameron said that he will not make public, nor will he make public the evidence that he said was on the basis of which these strikes were made. So basically, he's made himself judge, jury, and executioner.
Right, exactly. I was coming to that question. Aren't these extrajudicial killings? Or is this justified because they plotted terror attacks, as the one who was killed supposedly did? Alain?
Drone attacks have been conducted in very permissive environments in the last years.
So you think it should be a bit more tightly regulated then?
It should be very regulated and more regulated. Sorry.
Okay, Roland, do you think are we out of control here?
No, we're not. I think there's an elaborate procedure by the U.S. Department of Justice, to take the American example, to actually authorize drone strikes. It goes through several stages. There have to be decisions by civilians, by judges, that this particular strike is the only means available.
Some people argue, well, if instead of using these kinds of sanitized sort of warfare, you really should put boots on the ground, send troops into it to be more effective. What do you think, Alain?
drone strikes, it doesn't mean that you don't have troops on the ground. Sometimes you have, in order to target, you have to rely on troops on the ground that are making
it's air support, in other words.
Yes, exactly.
Right, right. Okay. But how do you see this, Andrew? I mean, some say, well, you really should send boots. Why? You shouldn't be using this automated kind of warfare.
From a human rights perspective, from a perspective of international law, that's not really the issue, the type of weapon you use. It's how you use it and whether you're distinguishing between legitimate targets, that is, enemy combatants, or and civilians. And that's a clear distinction that has to be made no matter the weapon, no matter whether you have troops on the ground or not.
Okay, but Roland, what about trying to win hearts and minds on the ground? We're losing hearts and minds on the ground in some places. People who are angry about their civilians, their families are being killed in this.
Well, yeah, they would be angry about boots on the ground, probably even more than they are angry about drones. International law was created at a time when this kind of terrorists did not exist. So I think we'll all have to work on amending international law and somehow incorporating drones into a transnational policy to fight that kind of terrorism.
And so exactly, should there be an international treaty, perhaps amending even the Geneva Convention for this?
Well, I think that's very dangerous, a very dangerous road to go down. I mean, international law came out and served us well in many instances and created clear rules that everyone understands. We're looking at this from a very Western perspective. What if, say, Russia flies a drone over Warsaw, or let's say London, flies that drone over London and takes out someone it considers one of its enemies? What would we say? We would be outraged. The West would be absolutely, rightfully outraged at that, and that's what's going on in many cases.
What if we just stopped it? As some people would like to see that happen. What could the danger be, or should this be stopped? Obviously, I know what you're going to say, Roland, but what do you see the dangers if it is stopped?
We are sending men and women to faraway places to fight for us. These people risk getting their legs blown off, getting traumatized for life, or to lose their lives. Now, I think we owe it to them that we buy them the best equipment that money can buy. That's the immediate task, and this is why I don't think that we will or we should stop using drones.
What dangers could you see, perhaps? Or Andrew, do you think it would only be positive to stop this?
Well, no, I don't think that my argument is to say no more drones, stop all drones altogether. I think that's unrealistic. But we have a problem with transparency. We do not understand and we cannot know the legal advice and the evidence because governments are simply not releasing that. And so we're left in this situation where we have to trust a president or we have to trust a prime minister to be judge, jury, and executioner. And I am not comfortable with that situation.
Well, Andrew, talking about the legal procedures is fine and transparency. But when it goes into the operational knowledge about how drones are used, I mean, there's obviously a need for secrecy there. So we need to draw a fine line between these two things. And I think that we are about to work this out.
Okay, but then I go back again to my London argument. So President Putin says, well, you have to trust me that we had the evidence and I took legal advice and I have that legal advice. I will not show you the evidence. I will not show you the legal advice. Do we trust Mr. Putin on this?
Well, very
Gentlemen, I'm so sorry. I got to cut this off at this point. Thank you so much. I'd like to continue this debate. That's all the time we've got for now. I'd like to thank our guests, Roland Freudenstein, Andrew Strohlein, and Alain Deneve. I'm Chris Burns. And until next time, thanks for connecting with The Network.